The hardest part about property investing is the beginning. You want to get started, but you don't have the experience, you don't have the team, and you don't have a very clear plan. And that is the purpose of this video. I'm going to take you through the step-by-step guide that I used to secure £8 million worth of property just last year for me and my clients, and what I would do if I had to start from zero in 2025, so that by the end of this, you've got a step-by-step checklist to follow from start to finish. And if you want to download a version of this checklist, you can access it through the link in the description. First question you need to ask yourself is, should I actually invest in property? And all I can say is that there are 4 reasons why I've been working in property for the past 5 years and why I think that it is such a powerful investment vehicle. Number 1 is that in 1950 we had 50 million people in the UK, and today we have 68 million people. That's an 18 million person increase that are in need of housing, but we have the same amount of land. So we're a small island with a growing population. Number 2 is that with 27 million homes for 68 million people and not enough new builds, prices are only going to go one way. This is just simple supply and demand. This supply and demand drives capital growth, which, if you don't know, is the increase of your property's value over time. Number 3 is what sets property investment apart from any other investment, and that is if you put £50,000 into stocks, they go up 10%, you've made £5,000. But if you put £50,000 into property, you could use it as a deposit on a £200,000 house. Now, if the market goes up 10%, then that 10% applies to the whole property price. So you've made £20,000 rather than £5,000. And that's what we call leverage. We use the bank's money to make a return for ourselves. And the 4th and final reason is that every single month, property puts money in your pocket. Buy a £200,000 property and rent it for £1,000 a month. Then after all your costs, you're making £400 every single month coming into your pocket. That's £4,800 extra a year while your property is growing in value over time. And these 4 forces working together make property one of the most powerful ways for you to build wealth in the UK. All right, so you've decided to invest in property, but what is actually next? A lot of people jump into property without really understanding all of their options. So now I'll walk you through the main strategies for property investing in the UK. So number 1 is something we all know about, which is buying a home to live in. Now, some people say this isn't really investing, but think about it. When you strategically buy a property to live in and add value to it, you are already investing. Plus, you might only need a 10% deposit instead of a 25% deposit like other property investments. Number 2 is probably the most common one that people know about for property investing, and that is buying a property and renting it out. The trusty buy-to-let. So let's say you buy a house for £150,000, rent it out for £1,000 a month, and you make £250 a month profit after all of your costs. And the property goes up in value, you get the monthly income, your tenant helps pay off your mortgage. This is just your bread and butter property strategy, buy-to-let. Number 3 is where you buy a property, add value to it through a renovation, and sell it on for a profit. I once bought a property in Wigan for £95,000. I spent £26,000 on renovations and sold it for £185,000. Now, this strategy can help you build capital to reinvest into more and more properties, and this is what is known as property flips. Number 4 is the one that I actually use at the moment, which again, instead of renting out a 4-bedroom house to just one family for £1,000 a month, what I do is I rent out each room individually for £500 a month, bringing in £2,000 a month total. Some people worry about managing multiple tenants, but remember, it's the tenants who are paying you, not the house. Now, these are called HMOs, or houses of multiple occupancy. And number 5 is called service accommodation. Let's say you buy a cottage in Cornwall. Instead of £1,000 a month rent, you could charge £100 per night, and you're making £3,000 per month. So if you just get 10 nights booked, you've already matched your monthly rent, and anything above that is just extra profit. Now, this is a bit harder to do these days with all the competition, and I think they're bringing in a bit more regulation around Airbnbs, but that's a different topic for a different video. Number 6 is a clever way to acquire property that many investors do actually use. If you buy a property for £100,000 and you spend £20,000 renovating it, you're totally in for £120,000. So let's just say, using round figures. Then after the work, let's say it's worth £160,000. You could get a new mortgage on that new value and pull out your original investment of £120,000, keeping the asset whilst getting your money back to do it all over again. This is known as buy, refurbish, refinance. And number 7, last but by no means least, there is a strategy for those of you who want to start from the ground up. Literally, you buy land and you build properties. You've got 2 options here. You can build and sell everything and just make a big profit, or you can keep the properties and rent them out long term, almost like a buy, refurb, refinance option, except you're building it from the ground up to begin with. Now, this is known as ground up property development, and this is a big step in terms of both your potential risk but also your potential reward. So if you're getting into property developments, just keep that in mind. Now, once you've decided your strategy, we need to think about building out the right team. So let me break down who you actually need at your side. First, you'll need a finance broker to help you get the best mortgage or bridging loans, to get the best rates, to find the best lenders who will actually work with you on your projects. Then you need a solicitor to check any issues that the property might have before you purchase it and help you through the legal process. You'll need an accountant to advise you on purchasing structures and taxes, just so that you can make smart investment decisions and save yourself as much money as well as make yourself as much money as possible. Once you've bought the property, you need a reliable management company to help you find tenants, manage repairs, and deal with the paperwork. And if you're planning on renovating, then you're going to need a good builder, project manager who can do quality work and make sure things are done on time to a good standard. And finally, the last thing that you'll probably need are property sources and estate agents, people who can help you and support you in finding and securing those property deals. And that kind of wraps up the 6 people that you'll need in what's often known as your power team. Now, to get your team sorted, there are 3 important questions that you need to answer before you can actually start investing. First question is, where should I invest? Whenever somebody asks me this, they're usually hoping that I'll tell them this perfect goldmine location, but there are usually 3 things to actually consider when you're thinking about your location. Number 1 is, if you want strong monthly cash flow, then look for suburbs and cheaper areas, cheap cities, large towns with growing economies. You want to find places that are affordable. Usually, further north you go, it gets more affordable in England. And you want to find areas that are good, with good population, so you've got a strong demand. Now, if you're looking for capital growth, then your main focus needs to be the major cities. Now, this is where business action happens, where the government invests, and where prices for properties typically rise faster and are usually more expensive. Just remember, you might make less money per month because the properties will cost you more. And if you want to mix up both, get a hybrid of the 2, the cash flow and the capital growth, then maybe look at the cheaper northern cities. You'll find reasonably priced properties at decent rental demands in potential growth areas. And the thing is, even in these so-called worst parts of the UK, property prices have soared over the past 30 years. And a £5,000 house back then could be worth £100,000 now. So it all comes down to a small island with a growing population. Property prices tend to rise everywhere over a very long period of time. So the real question isn't just, where should I invest? It's, what am I trying to achieve? I used to think that cash flow was all that mattered, but after years of investing, now I see that there are great ways to grow your wealth over time by investing in areas of capital growth. And as a result, I've personally shifted my areas a little bit over the past few years just to maximize my long-term results. Now, this brings us on to our second question. How are you going to pay for these properties? You see, there are 4 main ways that you can usually fund property deals. The first option is perfect if you're just getting started. Now, with a residential mortgage, you only need to put down 10% of the property's value. Although you need to live in it, it's often the easiest way to get your foot in the door. The second way that you can do it is the way most property investors do it, which is through buy-to-let mortgages, where you'll typically put down 25% as a deposit and the bank will fund the rest of it. I always tell my clients to go for interest-only mortgages here. It keeps your monthly costs down and gives you a much better cash flow, which is often what people are looking for. The third option is when you need to move pretty quick, or where the property can't be mortgaged, like if you found a property that needs a full renovation. Now, this is where bridging loans can come really handy. They're more expensive, but they get the job done much faster. And finally, the simplest option is cash. Whether it's your own cash or it's money that you're borrowing from other people, cash can give you the most flexibility and the quickest speed when it comes to buying property. Now, each of these has their place, so you just need to assess your personal circumstances and decide what actually works best for you. I'd be asking yourself questions like, am I willing to live in the property? Am I willing to take on the risk of a bridging loan? Does my deal still stack with the loan interest rates involved and all the fees involved with this particular piece of finance that you're using? Do you know anyone who even has capital in their bank that you could borrow? And if so, how much of a return could you offer them? There's plenty of things to think about, and like I've mentioned before, choosing the right one depends on your strategy and what you're actually trying to achieve. Now let's move on to the third question. Where do you actually find property deals? I'm just going to reel off a bunch of ones for you. So things like property websites, Rightmove, Zoopla, On the Market. Don't believe people who say that there aren't deals to be found on there. We just got 2 properties at £50,000 below the asking price on Rightmove just recently. You've got places like Spare Room. Now, this is perfect if you're looking for HMO deals, especially from struggling landlords with existing HMOs. Estate agents build relationships with people, get those deals really good, discounted before they hit the market. You've got property deal packages, you've got online ads, things like Facebook, Instagram, Google, TikTok and YouTube ads. You could do letter drops, leaflet drops. You've got things like property auctions. These are great for discounts and below market value deals. You could go to networking events. Some of my best deals actually have come from just talking with other investors and being introduced to other people. You could use social media and word of mouth, and you'd actually be surprised how many deals come from just letting people know what you do. Now, I said estate agents, you could also speak to letting agents. They know plenty of landlords that want to sell and they have an interest in keeping on that property like management purposes. So you could say to them, I'll buy the property and you can keep the management. You've got ways like friends and family. Never underestimate your own network. There are so many places that you can find deals. It's unbelievable. Now, before you even think about making an offer on a property, you need to know your numbers inside and out. And there are 2 crucial calculations that will tell you whether a deal is worth pursuing or not. But first, let me show some of the costs that you need to factor in when doing your numbers. Now, first, you've got your upfront costs. These are things like your purchase price and deposit. You've got your legal fees, stamp duty, mortgage broker fees, any sourcing fees that you might pay. Then you've got your ongoing costs, interest payments, management fees, maintenance, typically about 10% of your monthly rental income. Now, once you've got these costs clear, you need to calculate 2 key calculations. The first one is return on investment, otherwise known as ROI. Now, this tells you how much money you're making compared to what you put into the deal. So let me give you a quick example. Let's say you put in £50,000 total. That's your deposit, your legal fees, your stamp duty, just everything. And the property makes £4,800 per year profit. That gives you a return on investment of 9.6%. That's your annual profit divided by your total investment times by 100. The second calculation is yield. It's just your annual rental income divided by your total purchase price times by 100 again. So if you're getting £9,600 per year in rent on a £140,000 property, your yield is 6.85%. So you know how to find deals, you know where to go, you know how to calculate them to see if they're profitable. But now we come to something absolutely crucial, your due diligence. Most new investors lose money here because they don't know how to properly assess a property. So let's break down exactly how you actually do your due diligence properly. First is your property value. Don't just look at the properties within half a mile. That is way too broad in my opinion. Look at the last 5 properties that sold on that street and make sure that you're comparing like for like properties. Worst case scenario, go within a quarter mile, but still look for exact like for like properties. Comparing a 3-bedroom terrace with a 3-bedroom terrace. Now, second is rental income. This depends entirely on how you plan to actually rent it out. For a single let, you might want to look on Rightmove and OpenRent, see what properties, again, are like for like that are renting. For HMOs, you could use spare room. For service accommodation, you could look at Airbnb or AirDNA. But remember, you need to look at occupancy rates, not just the nightly rates when it comes to Airbnb. And third, look at your capital appreciation in the area. Rightmove's price trends can show you how much properties have grown in value over the past few years. So if properties have been growing 5% per year, you can factor that into your calculations. And finally, know all of your costs. So renovation, if it's needed, your deposit and legal fees, your stamp duty, management and maintenance. And don't forget your void periods. Get these right, and you'll know if you're looking at a good deal or a complete waste of time. After deciding if the deal is actually good, the next step is knowing how to handle viewings and make offers that get accepted. See, a lot of investors mess this up. They either miss problems during the viewing or they handle the offer process completely wrong. So here's your mini step-by-step guide for property viewings. First, when you're booking in a property viewing, try and get one outside of the estate agent's office hours. You're more likely to actually meet the seller directly then. Second, always get there 5 minutes early, check the roof, the gutters, the pointing, make sure everything externally is okay. Number 3, when you're inside, film anything you're unsure about because you could always show it to a builder later on. Number 4, if you're really concerned about missing things, you can actually just bring your builder along with you and either they'll do it for free or you could pay them like a day rate to come. Number 5 is don't stress about the agent. Just be polite, professional, but show that you mean business. And number 6 is after the viewing, always ask if they'd consider an offer, and if so, what sort of ballpark they think the offer would need to be. Now, when it comes to making offers, I have one important rule, and that is never offer there and then. Go home and crunch your numbers properly before you put in your offer. And when you do make your offer, have your paperwork ready. You'll need things like your proof of funds, things like your ID, proof of address. Just make sure it's all there ready to go, because again, it just proves you mean business. You're actually serious about buying the property. So your offer has been accepted. Now what happens? Now, there are 3 crucial things that you need to master if you want your property investment to actually succeed. First is that you need to understand the conveyancing process and the legal side of actually buying the property. So here you'll need a bunch of different people actually involved in the process. So you've got your solicitor, the seller's solicitor, the mortgage broker, the lender, the lender's valuer, possibly an independent surveyor. You've got the estate agent. You've got plenty of people involved in the process. And here's how it all works step by step. Firstly, your offer gets accepted. Then you instruct your solicitor. The memorandum of sale gets sent out to everybody involved. Draft contracts then get sent out. Your solicitor starts the local searches, and this is where they check things like planning permissions and any local issues. And while that's happening, your solicitor reviews the contract and asks any necessary questions. This is called raising inquiries. Now, once everything's clear, final contracts are drawn up and sent to both parties. Now, this might sound complicated, but don't worry, your solicitor handles pretty much all of this. So get a good solicitor and you'll be okay. You just need to understand the process so that you know what's happening at each stage. So when a solicitor gives you an update, you actually know what they're talking about. The second thing you need to understand for successful investments are surveys. Now, there are different types of surveys and they vary in costs. First, there's your basic mortgage valuation, which can cost anything from about £100 to £350. And this is just for your lender. You just have to pay that cost on behalf of the lender. Then there's what's called a RICS survey. This is the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. These are independent, detailed inspections of the property that are actually for you, the buyer. And they come in 3 levels. Level 1 is a condition survey at £250, which is just a basic overview. You've got level 2, which is your home buyers, about £450, which is a little bit more detailed. Then you've got your level 3 structural survey at about £800, which is the full works. So if you're nervous, just go for the full structural survey if you want to be absolutely certain. And now we come to the third and possibly most crucial part of property investment, and this is managing your property. Because you can find the perfect property, you can get yourself a great deal, but if you don't manage it properly afterwards, then everything can just fall apart. So let me break down your two main options. The first is that you can self-manage. Now, the big appeal here is that you're saving money. You're not paying anyone else to do it. But the downside, the tenants actually have your direct details. So this means that you could get calls at 3 a.m. about leaky pipes. And a lot of investors get into property for passive investment, which, that wouldn't be. So if you do go down this route, you'll need to have things like a reliable handyman that's on call, some good insurance coverage, and some really solid systems so that the tenants know that if there's an issue, who they contact that isn't you. So you need to kind of delegate tasks out to different people. And your second option is that you use a management agent. Now, yes, it costs about 8 to 12%, maybe a little bit more for HMOs and service accommodation of your monthly revenue, but it can be worth every single penny. They can handle all the headaches and keep you free and focused on actually growing your portfolio. However, you need to choose your agent carefully. A bad one can not only take your money, but also leave you with all the stress of managing the property. So which one should you choose? Well, it comes down to one question, and that is, do you want to be a landlord or do you want to be an investor? If you want to be hands-on and save money, then self-manage. But if you want to be focused on finding your next property deal and getting more deals done and building your portfolio quickly, get someone else to deal with the day-to-day stuff and go with a good management agent. But there you have it. We've covered absolutely all of the fundamentals of property investment. But what I've shared today isn't even scratching the surface. So if you want to go deeper and actually learn how to implement each of these strategies, then you can check out the full property investment course through the link in the description. I've got a property investment playbook with a bunch of free stuff, but that course will break down all of these topics in much more detail. It's completely free to access. Links in the description, and I'll see you in the course.